How's it going, guys? Aaron here, and welcome back to another video. I'm so glad you could make it. Today I'm getting back to my roots with a tech video. Today we're covering 5 tips for prolonged iPhone battery. Everything going on in the news, I thought it would be a good time to make this video. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, with what Apple has done, how people view it. Most people don't need a battery replacement, I would say, especially if the device is, a year and a half, let's say, and younger. And this applies to iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch. I would say anything really running iOS. So stay tuned for this. A lot of times it comes down to software settings and software that drains the system's resources and thus drains your battery. So it's usually not hardware, a battery replacement that's necessary. Now, of course, the battery itself does degrade over time. There's chemical reaction that goes on, and that doesn't go on forever, as well as it did at least in the beginning. So eventually you would need a battery replacement, but a lot of people think they do and they don't actually need it. So tip number 1, keep your brightness down. A lot of people that come to me and explain that complain rather that they have poor battery life, they sometimes have their brightness up very high and they say, oh, I need it, I can't see it. Well, there's a compromise with that because the system is set to use an ambient light sensor so that it knows the environment's brightness and so that it can adapt and give you a reasonable contrast, right, in the picture and the text, of course, by adapting the brightness of the backlight to the environment that the device is currently in. So you should really trust auto brightness, and if auto brightness is not on, go into settings. I'm talking about in iOS 11. Pull down, tap the search, and type in auto brightness, and anywhere you see auto brightness, make sure auto brightness is on. That's my best tip as of now for brightness. Now, if you only like to do it manually, adjust it manually, make sure that it's not too bright. In a way you can test this, at least to make sure that it's not having too much of an impact on your battery life, is to go into settings, go into battery, and make sure that under suggestions it doesn't say reduce brightness, because if it does, you need to reduce your brightness. Otherwise, the system is telling you reduce your brightness, otherwise your battery is going to drain unnecessarily quickly, more quickly than most people would anticipate. Okay, number 2 is reduce your auto lock time. A lot of people seem to, if you go into their battery settings, you'll notice that what takes up some of the most resources, besides actively used apps, of course, is the home and lock screen. And in my opinion, that comes from a couple things. It comes from auto lock and notifications. So make sure your auto lock time is reduced. By default, it's 1 minute, but some people seem to set it to more time, like 3 or 5 minutes, or never. Make sure that you reduce it down to something like 1 minute or even 30 seconds. I leave it on 1 minute. It's a default. It works fine for me. Yes, it can be annoying if you need your phone to stay on the same image for a long period of time, but if that's the case, just wake it up periodically by tapping it or scrolling a little bit back and forth, or you can even turn it to never and then turn it back when you're done doing the task that requires that screen be maintained on the display. Okay, that sort of leads me into a side point that's not one of the 5 tips, but reduce your notifications. Notifications wake up the device, turns the screen on, it takes the phone sort of out of that sleep mode, and it does damage to your battery life. So make sure you reduce your notifications, okay? So that's 1, 2, and 2B, let's call it. Now, number 3 is turn off background app refresh, okay? Background app refresh is a feature that allows certain apps, or maybe all apps, I haven't checked to see if any apps don't have the feature, where it can check the web to see if there's any content that can be populated periodically in the app to give you the most up-to-date information the second you click on the app, or I suppose for notification purposes. If you absolutely need it, leave the feature on for an app. Unless you absolutely need it, turn it off. You can go into the settings, general, background app refresh. There's switches for each individual app that you can turn off or leave on or turn on. But at the top there's a main switch that allows you to customize the setting. There's a version for cellular and Wi-Fi, I believe. One where if you're just connected to Wi-Fi, it will do it. Just turn it off. If you can deal with it, turn it off. It's a main shut-off valve. It turns off all the switches beneath it. And if you can just bear by going into the app and getting your content, and then it'll first populate, it'll save your battery big time. If you want the convenience, there's a trade-off with battery. It's just to be expected across all iOS devices, and honestly, probably all devices, whether it's Android or anything else. I'm not as familiar with how they work, but there is definitely a trade-off. The more features you use that are resource intensive, the less battery life you're going to get. Simple as that. Number 4, keep third-party apps up to date. It's important to keep your system up to date with patch updates, of course. There's major versions that come out. Those can slow down your device, and those can have battery life consequences in a negative way. But patch updates generally, I mean, you may want to read a little bit about them before you download them. They're generally positive. They fix bugs, they patch holes for security reasons, things that people have discovered, Apple works on and addresses. But third-party apps, people don't realize they can have a huge toll on the entire system. I've seen at least one app where it can cause every other app seemingly to crash the second you open it, and it can cause Apple Pay to stop working and 3D Touch. I mean, those are core features. Don't ask me why it has the ability to do that, but if you have a problematic third-party app, try updating it. If not, delete it. Maybe delete it and reinstall it, re-download from the App Store. If it's still a problem, delete it, okay? They can cause, I would say, battery life issues. Some of them are really resource intensive. Just keep that in mind. Keep all your third-party apps up to date. If they're giving you trouble, or if you go into settings, battery, and you see at the top of that list, let's say of the last 7 days, and you can turn the little clock icon to get more detailed information. If you see at the top of that list high percentage numbers, figures next to third-party apps that you don't use a lot, but they just seem to be draining the battery as evidenced in that chart, maybe it's time to delete that app or update the app or contact the developer and let them know that it's a problem. Okay, and number 5, turn off your unused antennas. Consider airplane mode when you have poor cell service until you get out of that zone, until you get into a zone of strong cell service, and you can take it out of airplane mode. If you don't need Bluetooth, turn it off in settings. If you don't need Wi-Fi, I mean, I've been leaving it on more recently, but if you don't need it, turn it off. Simple as that. It can help save your battery. Now, I don't know the exact details of how much battery you can save with that, but I can tell you that one of the things that can cause battery drain is low signal strength. Sometimes that will actually appear in that list of that itemized list that shows the breakdown of what's been using your battery from most to least in the past 24 hours and last 7 days. So make sure that if you have really poor signal strength and you don't need to make an emergency call, then you should just pop into airplane mode or turn off the antenna for a particular feature that has a weak connection until you get into a place where you have a strong connection. Simple as that. 5 tips, prolong your battery life, save yourself a trip to the Apple Store, save yourself time. Don't go to one of these third-party places and get a battery done or component replaced unless you're okay with paying the consequences. That's all I can tell you. But a lot of times it's software, you can fix it yourself, and it's that simple. 5 tips plus that bonus tip about reducing the number of notifications that you have on. Go into your settings, notifications, and turn off as many as possible. And yeah, that's it. I mean, make sure you are following your passions. Do what makes you happy. Check out the channel. Look for any videos that might interest you. I have tech videos. I have videos where I'm talking about business. I have videos where I talk about just some thoughts of mine. So it's a little bit of a variety channel, but we do definitely focus on tech here. And that's pretty much it. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. And until next time, this is Aaron signing out.